Most of us take what we know about Jesus for granted. For Christians, generally speaking, they believe him to be the Messiah, the Son of God, and one who could do great healings and other miracles. But what most of us don't realize is how miraculous it is that we even know who he is at all. From a historical perspective, there were many obstacles that could have prevented Jesus, and by extension, all of Christianity, from surviving the course of time. So many people with Jesus' background and social status in the first century were forgotten and swallowed up during the course of history. Although it would be easy for a person to object to this position on theological grounds, specifically pointing out Jesus' divinity as a reason for why we know him over 2,000 years later, Jesus still was, as most Christians believe, fully human as well as divine, and as a result, would be 100% subject to the course of history. Therefore, from a historical perspective, we should not even know who Jesus is. And the miracle of Jesus is that, against all odds, we do indeed know who he is. This position might be troubling to some. So in order to back up this claim, let's take a look at several factors which stood in the way of Jesus being remembered over 2,000 years later. The first factor that stood in the way was that Jesus came from a poor family in an obscure village called Nazareth. Everything about Jesus and what we know about him begins here. As Professor Alan Callahan from Harvard Divinity School states, history isn't made to record the deeds of a person like Jesus. Jesus is very much like most people, statistically speaking, who have ever existed in the world. Poor, obscure, no pretensions, no royalty or distinction of any kind. They live under less than desirable conditions, and they die that way. There's nothing historically remarkable about that. Yet despite what Callahan says, Jesus is a major outlier to these statistics. As a result, if Jesus was in all of these categories and should most likely have not survived the test of time, then it's fair to state that he must have been a remarkable historical figure to be remembered over 2,000 years later. And the first century Jews who met Jesus clearly saw him as remarkable. After all, being a poor Jewish miracle worker would have been seen as a contradiction in terms. It was believed that being a poor Jewish person meant that sin was part of the family and was therefore viewed as divine punishment. So although being a miracle worker would have not made Jesus unique in the first century, it was just being a poor miracle worker which made him noteworthy and caused people to question what they knew about God and the kingdom. However, no matter how much Jesus got people to question what they knew about the kingdom of God, whether as a poor miracle worker or by what he said and did, his memory should have mostly been erased from history following his crucifixion at the hands of the Romans. In the eyes of Judaism, once a supposed Messiah is killed, the story is over and they are eventually forgotten. Moreover, it proves that Jesus, in this case, wasn't the Messiah, because the belief was that Messiahs don't suffer and die. Yet the story was not over as people began experiencing him in both visions and bodily form. His disciples, both men and women, began to spread the word about Jesus. Although we all know that Christianity would eventually succeed, the people spreading the word about Jesus did not have this certainty, especially since spreading the movement was proving to be not as successful as they hoped it to be. Clearly, it wasn't exactly being welcomed by all Jews simply because the idea that Jesus would be the Messiah seemed quite unreasonable and even offensive to some. After all, as most Jews believed, Jesus wasn't a warrior king who would overthrow the Roman Empire. Add to the fact that he was crucified, and that would be the nail in the coffin, so to speak. for many Jews, since a Messiah being executed seemed out of the question. As a result, the earliest followers, after not having the successes they were hoping for, had no idea if the movement would be successful, especially when they began to be persecuted and even killed for their beliefs. It seems that the memory of Jesus could have ended here with the demise of Christianity. Yet, one of the more successful persecutors of Christians, Saul of Tarsus, got knocked off his horse, so to speak, which led to one of the biggest conversions in history. He began spreading Christianity like wildfire to both Jews and Gentiles alike. His message was simple: Jesus is Lord. But in the Roman Empire, the only Lord was Caesar, and it was written on every coin for all to see. Caesar was Lord. He was the Son of God. But when Jesus was resurrected 3 days after being crucified by the Romans, Paul saw Jesus' resurrection as God's yes to Jesus and no to the Roman Empire. Jesus was Lord. Caesar was not. As a result, the Christian message became a threat to Rome, and it was met with devastating results. The persecution of Christians was a devastating blow, and it continued the growing uncertainty amongst them that Christianity might not succeed, leaving the memory of Jesus in the dust. However, another major reversal in history occurs when Emperor Constantine made Christianity a legal religion in the Roman Empire in the year 313. Whatever his motivations were, whether religious, politically motivated, or simply just to please his mom, it proved to be a major stepping stone for the spread of Christianity. Eventually, in the year 380, Emperor Theodosius makes Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire, making a complete reversal from crucifying Jesus for treason to now becoming arguably his biggest advocate. It is at this point that, against all odds, the poor Jewish peasant from the lowly city of Nazareth became embedded in the course of history forever. So although, as Professor Callahan states, there is nothing historically remarkable about Jesus, and was therefore not made to record the deeds of a person like him, he nevertheless becomes the most significant person in history. In order for Jesus to defy all the odds where others would simply fade away, one can't help but think about how extraordinary he must have been to be around in the first century. As a comparison, most of us could probably think of people who made us feel like a better person just by simply being around them. Usually these people will make an effect but then be forgotten perhaps a century later. Now if we add 2,000 years in the case of Jesus while being mindful of his humble upbringing, not to mention all of those who gave up their lives for him, then being in the presence of Jesus would have been like being around the greatest person we have ever known, times infinity. If the greatest people we have ever known made us feel like a better person when simply being around them, then how much of a better person would we have felt when being in the presence of Jesus?